I received a letter from someone who was in last Sunday's service. The letter began, "Being at the chapel last Sunday and hearing your sermon reminded me why I don't go to church." And after that, the letter got uncomplimentary. Well, why are you here? Why do you go to church? I often ask myself that as I look out on you on Sunday morning. Why are they here? I suppose that is the most frequent question I receive from first-time visitors here when they see all of you and they ask me, well, why are they here? I always say, well, they appreciate good preaching. And then they say, no, why are they here? Now, I wasn't born yesterday. I know that many of you are here for less than theological reasons. Say you're 16 years old, and because your mother doesn't believe in democracy, you're here. You were made to be here. We parents sometimes work out our parental inability to control you on Saturday night by controlling you on Sunday morning. Why do I have to go to church? The child asks. Well, because you live in this house and you don't make mortgage payments. That's why you have to go to church. But that's hardly a theological explanation. Now, I know that there are others of you who may be here because although church is not your cup of tea, church means much to somebody whom you love. She thinks church is a good idea, and you think she is a good idea, and so you're here. Now, I suppose the day is long past when anybody is here because it will, help you in business or to be seen at church. It's been a long time since the right people, the people on top, were at church. Habit, childhood holdover. Well, wherever you're here, I want you to know, for me, it doesn't bother me a bit that you may be here for less than theological reasons, because as a preacher, I take you as I get you. Furthermore, I think that one of the major reasons that I'm here as your preacher is to help you name why you're here. To help you theologically to articulate the reasons beneath your stated reasons for being here. Because as Augustine once said, sometimes the real reasons are better than the reasons that you know. Now, today's gospel lesson occurs on a Sunday. It occurs on an Easter Sunday. The grieving disciples are gathered, just like we're gathered today. And what happens then is a shock. Hear today's gospel from the 24th chapter of Luke. Jesus himself stood among them, and he said, "Peace be with you." And they were startled and terrified. They thought they were seeing a ghost. He said to them, "Why are you frightened, and why do doubts arise in your hearts? Look at my hands and my feet. See, it is myself. Touch me and see, for a ghost does not have flesh and bones as you see that I have." And when he had said this, he showed them his hands, he showed them his feet. While in their joy they were disbelieving and still wondering, he said to them, "Have you anything here to eat?" They gave him a piece of broiled fish, and he took it and ate it in their presence. And then he said to them, "These are my words that I spoke to you while I was still with you, that everything written about me in the law of Moses and the prophets and the Psalms must be fulfilled." And then he opened their minds to understand the scriptures. And he said, "Thus it is written, that the Messiah is to suffer and to rise from the dead on the third day, and that repentance and forgiveness of sins is to be proclaimed in his name to all nations, beginning from Jerusalem. And you are witnesses to these things." This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Now, I want to walk you through this Bible story because I'm convinced that this is your story. This is you on Sunday morning. I believe that this story is a kind of parable, a revelation of us at worship. This happened on a Sunday. First, what is the catalyst for the story? Jesus stood among them and said, "Peace." Sunday happens whenever Jesus comes and stands among us. Now, I know this cuts against some of the reasons that you thought you were here. We've been conditioned to think that worship is mostly about us, titillation of my feelings, meeting of my needs, answering of my questions. No. There's a popular expression today in the church growth movement which speaks of the need to create user-friendly churches. That church is mostly here for the meeting of people's felt needs, as they say. Me, me, me. We think worship begins about 11 o'clock when we all get here. No. Worship's true beginning is whenever Jesus gets here, when he stands among us, when he speaks to us. We're here because we've been called. We've been convened. Now, I know that you may think you're here out of a sense of personal duty, or because your mother dragged you here to please your boyfriend or get a psychological boost for the rest of the week. Forget it. You're here, even if you didn't know that's why you're here, because Jesus has graciously called you. It's his presence that makes worship, not yours. It's his presence. I suppose if Jesus had not come and stood among them that day, they would have just gotten together and they would have grieved. They'd had a little memorial service. They'd have all gone back home. But no, Jesus came and stood among them, and there was worship. When Jesus gets here, that's when it's worship. This is what differentiates church from Rotary. This is why this is not a pep rally for the denomination's latest social crusade, or group therapy, or the League of Women Voters. It's Jesus. He comes, he stands among us. Easter is what makes all this happen. And I stress this because in the modern world, particularly in the modern academic world, we're often inept at naming our lives theologically. If you feel a tug on your innermost heart, you call it heartburn or a mild bout with depression. If you feel something is like missing in your life, you go out to Blockbusters and rent a video. When you celebrate, you pour yourself a drink. When you've got a deep, deep question about yourself, you call in to Dr. Joe Graydon on Saturday morning. So quite naturally, it's easy to get confused. It's easy to get the impression that all this is about you. No. Like the story says, Sunday starts when Jesus comes, stands among us, and says, "Peace." Now, I would secondly have you note the disciples' reaction. Maybe you always thought it was like good news when Jesus gets here. No, look at their reaction in the story. No, they were startled and they were terrified and they thought they were seeing a ghost. Someone emerged from the chapel during Holy Week, said indignantly, "I come to church to feel better, to receive a lift for the week. Now I'm leaving depressed and down." She asked for $1 back. But you will notice, if you've been here on past Sundays, like in the Easter scriptures we've been reading, you will notice that one of the weird things about the gospel stories of Easter is that on that first Easter, there were few people who felt unadulterated joy that dead Jesus had come back to them and stood among them and spoke to them as the risen Christ. You see it right here. They were startled. They were terrified. They didn't know what to think. And I suppose as your preacher, I should be asking myself right now, when is the last time I've preached a sermon that terrified somebody in church? It's sort of startling that I hardly ever get startled reactions to my preaching. Now, I've noticed that I seem to get more startled reactions like when I'm preaching at baccalaureate services. End of the school year, everybody gathers here, parents, grandparents, and we have a service. Thank the Lord we're graduating. But I seem to get a kind of high percentage of sort of negative reactions, and I wonder why. And I wonder if it's at maybe a baccalaureate service, you get a high percentage of people who've never been in church in their lives. Maybe they've come for a show or a pretty ceremony. They don't come to be startled or terrified, much less to think. It takes sort of training to know how to appropriate what goes on here on Sunday morning. As we said, worship begins when Jesus arrives. And when the risen Christ stands among us, as those of you who've been here on previous Sundays may testify, anything can happen. Sometimes you do feel joy. Sometimes you do feel a sense of peace to help you make it through the week. But I bet there have been occasions when you've been startled, when you've been terrified. As the psalmist says, it is a fearful thing to fall into the hands of a living God. It's an easy thing to fall in the hands of a dead God. But a living God who comes back to us on Easter, oh, that's a fearful thing. And so Jesus asked his people, why are you frightened? That's what he asked the disciples. Why are you frightened? Why do doubts arise in your hearts? Now, I want a number of you to note that at the first Easter, even with the risen Christ standing right there in front of them, there were a lot of people there who doubted. And I say this because I know that there are some of you out there this morning who doubt. And you think that because you doubt, maybe you're not supposed to be here. Would you please note, right here, first Easter, the 12 people who had spent the most time with Jesus, they doubted. What makes us any better at believing than those disciples? There is doubt. But then would you note that if you doubt, if maybe you're here this morning desiring visible, tangible proof, well, in a way, you've come to the right place, says this story. If you will note, Jesus doesn't rebuke anybody for their doubt. Rather, he gives these doubters what they need in order to believe. You need physical, tangible, empirical proof? Okay. Touch me and see. Here are my hands and my feet. Give me that fish over there. Let me eat it. A willingness to focus on something other than yourself and your needs. An eagerness to be startled. A willingness to be shocked. To admit to your doubts. These are, according to the story from Luke, Sunday morning prerequisites. Luke says that Jesus gave his startled, terrified, doubting disciples what they needed. So this means that you can go ahead. You can go ahead and come as you are on Sunday morning. He'll give you what you need. He doesn't rebuke us for the wrong reasons. He doesn't rebuke us for the desire not to doubt. He gives us what we need. And that's important. Because sometimes the things of faith seem so amorphous. They seem so vague. You can't get your hands around them. But you come here. You come here to this big, beautiful, solid stone of this building. Or you look upon the faces of the choir as they're singing. You hear the rumbling music of the organ. Or maybe you pick up something in the words of the hymn. And you are given the visible, tangible reassurance that you need. You believe. Sometimes we try to out-spiritualize Jesus. I mean, by that I mean we act like, I run into people and they say, I'm not very religious. I don't feel close to God. Well, what do you do? I mean, when have you tried to be close to God? It's physical closeness is important. To touch, to see, to feel. This is a very material kind of religion. He didn't leave us out there with faith, just something floating around in our minds, an idea. You come here to stuff you can touch and see and feel. And then Luke says, he opened their minds to understand the Scriptures. He opened their minds to understand the Scriptures. And I love that. Now, I know that many of you here are educated, intelligent people, and you like to think of yourself as already being open-minded. Madonna having relations with small animals? Don't you think that's terrible? Well, being at Duke, I do try to keep an open mind about those things. No, Luke says, Jesus came and stood among them in their worship, and he opened their minds. He had to open their minds about Easter. They weren't ready with their minds for Easter. Didn't we say here on Easter Sunday and then the Sunday after that modern people tend to be open-minded about everything except religion? Didn't we demonstrate a kind of weird closed-mindedness about any data which does not fit into our Baconian cause-effect technology-rendered world? Strange. But there are a lot of non-religious people who are fond of caricaturing religious people as being closed-minded. No, the story says a man returning from the dead, standing among them, well, they thought it was a ghost. Most of them, I suppose, didn't know what to think. So the risen Christ had to get in there and open their minds, had to sabotage their little universe, had to blow their minds before they could get it. So don't think a Sunday is a time to come down here and get confirmed what you already knew, to bolt down your belief like the pews that you're sitting in, to get it all sealed in concrete. No. You have to get up on Sunday morning and get all dressed up and come over here to the chapel and get into the kind of stuff we get into on Sunday morning in order to blow your mind, in order to open your mind. Because what goes on here is not common knowledge. What goes on here is not what is affirmed by 9 out of 10 average Americans. Somebody comes in here to the chapel. They come out Sunday morning. They say to me on the way out the door, well, I have never heard anything like that before in my life. And I usually say, well, what did you make on the SAT? And then they'll say, why, 1350? And I said, well, that's only average around here. Stick with it. It may come to you. Don't come out of here complaining you've never heard any of this stuff before. What do you expect? Look at where you live. Look at the age in which we dwell. Church is a place to get your mind blown. Not an escape from reality, but a penetration further into reality. Reality you'd have never known if Jesus had not come into your life and opened your mind. And then there's one last word. What's the last thing Jesus says to his people at the end of the story? He says, you are witnesses to these things. You're witnesses to these things. Maybe the real test of Sunday is not how you come in, but how you go out. We come here on Sunday called by the risen Christ. He comes, he stands among us. He stupefies some, he startles others, offers peace to others. And then he gives us what we need, tangible, visible reassurance. To others he gives a fitly spoken word of comfort. He opens our minds so that we might understand the Scriptures. And then he sends us forth into the world to be his witnesses. You're a witness. You notice in a court of law, when a witness is called forward, we aren't interested in the personal history of the witness or the personal characteristics. We just ask the witness, what have you seen? What have you heard? Tell the court about it. You're a witness. So tomorrow, say at work or somewhere in the library or something, somebody asks you, well, how was church yesterday? And you say, well, it's hard to say. You'd have kind of had to be there to believe it. But remember, you're a witness. A witness simply tells what's been seen and what's been heard. And maybe before the court of the world, the story is implying that you and I are the only witnesses Jesus has. So go ahead and be a witness. Try to tell and show what this has meant. Do you, nice, intelligent person like you, do you believe in the risen Christ? Do you believe that in this world of death, there can be the triumph of life? Believe it? I don't really believe it. I mean, I've witnessed it. I was there on Sunday.